The moment someone assumes you do not belong, they stop looking for the truth. Monica Hayes had no idea that a routine drive through Buckhead would become one of the most expensive mistakes a police officer would ever make. The late afternoon sun reflected across the polished black paint of her luxury SUV as she turned onto a quiet residential boulevard lined with towering oak trees and multi-million-dollar homes. Everything about the neighborhood projected success. Immaculate lawns stretched behind decorative iron gates. Luxury vehicles sat in long driveways. Security cameras watched from elegant stone entrances. Monica drove this route almost every day. She barely noticed the scenery anymore. Her attention was focused on an upcoming meeting scheduled less than 45 minutes away. A major development project was entering its final phase, and several investors were expecting her presentation. Her phone rested silently in the center console. A leather portfolio sat in the passenger seat. The day felt ordinary. Then flashing blue lights appeared in her rearview mirror. Monica glanced up, surprised. For a second, she assumed the patrol vehicle was heading somewhere else. The road was empty. She was not speeding. She had not run a stop sign. Nothing about her drive had been unusual, yet the lights remained behind her. She calmly activated her turn signal and pulled to the curb beneath the shade of a large maple tree. The patrol car stopped several yards behind her. People walking nearby slowed their pace. A landscaping crew across the street briefly looked up from their work. Monica took a quiet breath and waited. Officer Grant Miller stepped out of the cruiser. He adjusted his sunglasses and approached the driver's side window with deliberate confidence. Monica lowered the window politely. "Good afternoon, officer," she said. Miller glanced around the interior of the SUV before looking directly at her. "License and registration." His tone was flat, professional on the surface, but carrying something else underneath. Monica retrieved the documents without argument and handed them over. Miller studied them longer than necessary. His eyes moved from the paperwork to Monica and back again. "This vehicle belongs to you?" Monica nodded. "Yes." The officer looked toward the dashboard, then toward the expensive leather interior. "Interesting." Monica remained calm. "Is there a problem?" Miller ignored the question. "Where are you headed today?" She answered politely. "A business meeting." "What kind of business?" The question felt unusual. Monica noticed it immediately. Still, she kept her voice steady. "Real estate development." Miller's expression did not change. If anything, he appeared even more skeptical. He glanced once more at the registration. "And you own this vehicle?" "Yes, officer." Across the street, a homeowner standing near a mailbox watched the exchange. Above them, a security camera pointed directly toward the road. Neither Monica nor Miller paid attention to it. Yet that small lens was already recording every second. Imagine sitting in your own vehicle, carrying your own documents, driving through your own neighborhood, and realizing someone has already decided your answers cannot possibly be true. Monica did not know it yet, but before the sun set that evening, different cameras would capture the same encounter. And months later, those recordings would become evidence no one could ignore. Officer Grant Miller continued studying the documents as if he expected them to reveal a hidden inconsistency. The registration matched the vehicle. The insurance information was current. The driver's license belonged to Monica Hayes. Every piece of paperwork appeared perfectly normal. Yet instead of ending the encounter, Miller seemed increasingly interested in extending it. He handed the documents back slowly. "How long have you owned this vehicle?" Monica accepted them and placed them neatly on the center console. "Almost 2 years." Miller glanced once more around the interior. "That is a very expensive vehicle." Monica nodded. "Yes, it is." The officer shifted his weight and looked down the quiet street. "You live around here?" Another unusual question. Monica noticed it immediately. She also noticed the homeowner across the street still standing near the mailbox. The landscaping crew had moved farther down the block, but one worker occasionally looked in their direction. The neighborhood remained peaceful. The only disruption was the patrol car parked behind her SUV. "I do," Monica replied. "Where exactly?" Monica paused. "Officer, may I ask why that is relevant?" Miller did not answer directly. "I am just trying to understand the situation." The statement hung in the air. Monica had heard versions of it before. Questions presented as routine. Curiosity disguised as procedure. She remained calm. "I live 3 houses down." Miller followed her gaze toward a row of elegant homes further along the street. His expression suggested he did not believe her. That house belongs to you. Yes. For several seconds, neither spoke. The officer seemed to be weighing her answer against assumptions he had already formed. Then he looked toward the luxury SUV again. What exactly do you do in real estate development? Monica folded her hands comfortably on the steering wheel. I own a development company. Miller raised an eyebrow. You own it? Yes. The officer's skepticism was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Yet Monica refused to match his tone. Years of experience had taught her something important. Composure often reveals more than confrontation. Imagine realizing that every answer you provide only creates new doubts in the mind of someone who has already decided not to believe you. Imagine knowing the facts are on your side while watching someone search desperately for reasons to reject them. Monica glanced briefly toward her dashboard. A small indicator light confirmed her vehicle's recording system was active. Every question, every response, every second, quietly preserved. Several houses away, another security camera overlooked the street. A delivery driver parked near the corner. A jogger approached from the opposite direction. The ordinary rhythm of the neighborhood continued around them. Miller, however, seemed focused on one thing. You own the company. You own the house. You own the vehicle. He said the words slowly, as if repeating them might somehow change their meaning. Monica offered a polite smile. That is correct. For the first time, a faint look of frustration crossed the officer's face. Nothing she said contradicted the evidence. Nothing justified further suspicion. Yet something prevented him from accepting the obvious conclusion. Then his radio crackled softly. Miller stepped back and listened to a brief transmission. When the message ended, he looked toward Monica once more. What happened next would transform an uncomfortable traffic stop into something much larger. Because instead of concluding the encounter, Officer Grant Miller decided to push even further. Officer Grant Miller returned from the radio call with renewed determination. Whatever hesitation might have existed earlier had disappeared. Monica Hayes watched him approach the driver's side window again, his expression now carrying the confidence of someone convinced he was uncovering a larger story. The problem was that the story existed only in his imagination. Step out of the vehicle for a moment, please, he said. Monica looked at him calmly. May I ask why? Miller gestured toward the SUV. I have a few additional questions. Around them, the neighborhood continued moving at its normal pace. A cyclist passed at the far end of the block. A delivery truck rolled through an intersection. Somewhere nearby, sprinklers activated across a perfectly maintained lawn. Everything felt ordinary except the growing tension surrounding a traffic stop that should have ended several minutes earlier. Monica opened the door and stepped onto the curb. Her posture remained relaxed. Her voice remained steady. She had spent years negotiating multi-million-dollar projects, navigating city hearings, and speaking before investors. Remaining calm under pressure was not something she practiced. It was simply who she was. Miller walked slowly around the SUV, studying it from multiple angles. Nice vehicle, he said. Thank you. Not many people can afford something like this. Monica offered a polite smile. A lot of people work very hard. The answer seemed to frustrate him. Every attempt to create doubt kept colliding with the same obstacle. Facts. The registration was valid. The insurance was valid. The driver's license was valid. The homeowner standing across the street had quietly taken out a phone and begun recording. Monica noticed, but said nothing. She also noticed another small camera mounted above the gate of a nearby property. The entire street seemed designed to document itself. Miller stopped near the rear of the SUV. You said you own a development company. Yes. How large is this company? Monica answered honestly. We have projects in 3 states. The officer looked surprised despite himself. 3 states. That is correct. And you are the owner? I am. Imagine answering every question truthfully and watching each truthful answer create more suspicion rather than less. Imagine realizing someone cannot reconcile reality with the assumptions they made the moment they saw you. That was exactly where Monica found herself. Miller glanced toward one of the large homes nearby. Which house did you say was yours? Monica pointed calmly toward an elegant stone residence visible beyond a row of trees. The officer followed her gesture. His eyes lingered on the property. Then he looked back at her. That house. Yes. Miller stared for several seconds. At that exact moment, a black luxury sedan turned onto the street and slowed near the residence Monica had indicated. A man in a business suit stepped out holding a briefcase. He noticed Monica immediately. "Ms. Hayes," he called. "The investors moved the meeting up by 30 minutes." Monica recognized him instantly. He was one of her senior executives. The man's arrival changed everything. For the first time since the stop began, Officer Grant Miller looked genuinely uncertain. And for the first time that afternoon, the version of reality he had constructed was beginning to collapse in front of him. The arrival of the executive changed the atmosphere on the street almost instantly. He approached with the confidence of someone who knew exactly who Monica Hayes was and why her time mattered. "Ms. Hayes, the conference call has already started," he said. "The investors are waiting." Monica nodded politely. "Thank you, Michael. I will be there shortly." The executive glanced toward Officer Grant Miller and then toward the patrol vehicle parked behind the SUV. A brief look of confusion crossed his face. "Is everything all right?" Monica answered before the officer could speak. "We are finishing a conversation." Michael looked as though he wanted to ask more questions, but he respected her decision and stepped back toward the sedan. Officer Miller watched the exchange carefully. The certainty that had driven his actions earlier was beginning to fade. For the first time, he appeared unsure of his next move. The facts in front of him no longer matched the assumptions he had made when he first saw Monica driving through the neighborhood. Yet instead of ending the stop, he continued searching for some explanation that would allow him to preserve the story he had already constructed in his mind. "So this man works for you?" Miller asked. "Yes," Monica replied. "He is one of our senior executives." The officer glanced again toward the luxury sedan. "Your company must be doing very well." Monica smiled slightly. "We have been fortunate to help a lot of communities grow." Across the street, the homeowner with the phone continued recording. Another resident had emerged from a nearby driveway. Two people now watched openly. The longer the encounter continued, the more attention it attracted. Monica noticed none of this seemed to concern Officer Miller. He remained focused on proving something that evidence refused to support. "You said your company operates in 3 states," he continued. "That is correct. And you own the property down the street?" "Yes." "And this vehicle?" Monica nodded patiently. "Yes, officer." A silence settled between them. The answers never changed because the truth never changed. Imagine standing in front of someone who keeps asking the same questions, not because they need information, but because they do not like the information they already have. Imagine realizing that every fact only makes them more uncomfortable because it challenges what they expected to find. Monica had experienced similar situations before. Success had taught her many lessons. One of them was that confidence did not require raising your voice. It only required standing firmly in the truth. A notification suddenly appeared on her phone, then another, then several more. Michael checked his own device and frowned. "Ms. Hayes," he said carefully, "the legal department is asking whether everything is documented." Monica looked toward her dashboard camera indicator. The small light remained illuminated. She glanced toward the nearby security cameras mounted on neighboring properties. Then she noticed the homeowner across the street still recording with a clear view of the entire scene. "Yes," she said quietly, "everything is documented." Those 4 words carried more significance than anyone on that street realized. Because while Officer Grant Miller believed he was conducting an ordinary stop, a complete record of the encounter was already taking shape. And before the week was over, that record would reach people whose job was to examine every second of it. The meeting Monica Hayes was supposed to attend that afternoon eventually began without her. Investors gathered around a polished conference table overlooking the Atlanta skyline, while attorneys, executives, and advisors joined remotely from other cities. Yet despite the importance of the project, another conversation was quickly becoming a higher priority. Less than an hour after the traffic stop ended, members of the company's legal team had already started reviewing the information Monica provided. They examined timestamps, vehicle recordings, security footage locations, and witness accounts. The more they learned, the more concerned they became. Monica sat quietly in her office that evening, watching the city lights appear beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her luxury SUV was parked below in the private garage. The same vehicle that had attracted so much attention earlier now sat exactly where it belonged. On the large screen in front of her, attorneys reviewed footage collected from multiple sources. The dashboard camera provided a clear record of the conversation. The neighborhood security cameras captured the broader scene. The homeowner's recording showed additional angles. Together, The videos created a remarkably complete timeline. No one needed speculation. The facts spoke for themselves. Attorney David Lawson leaned forward during the video conference. How many cameras documented the encounter? One of the legal analysts answered immediately. At least 4 confirmed so far. Another attorney added, possibly more. Several neighboring properties maintain continuous recording systems. David nodded slowly. That is significant. Monica listened without interruption. She had spent years building businesses. She understood that facts mattered more than emotions. Documentation mattered more than assumptions. And evidence mattered more than opinions. Imagine realizing that a moment someone hoped would disappear quietly had instead been preserved from multiple angles. Imagine knowing every question, every response, every decision could now be reviewed carefully by people trained to examine details. That was exactly where the situation stood. Across town, Officer Grant Miller was finishing paperwork related to the stop. At first, he treated it as another routine report. But as he began documenting the encounter, he encountered an uncomfortable problem. The more he wrote, the harder it became to explain why the stop had continued after every document checked out. The registration matched. The insurance matched. The identification matched. The ownership claims proved accurate. Yet the encounter continued anyway. For the first time, Miller began recognizing how the incident might appear when viewed by someone who had not shared his assumptions. Back in Monica's office, the legal review continued. Additional information emerged. One attorney discovered that the entire interaction occurred within view of multiple residential security systems. Another identified witnesses willing to provide statements if necessary. The timeline became stronger by the minute. Finally, David Lawson looked directly at Monica. Based on what we have reviewed today, I believe this deserves a much closer examination. Monica folded her hands thoughtfully. I am not interested in headlines. David nodded. I know. I am interested in accountability. The room fell silent for a moment. Then the attorney answered with complete confidence. Accountability begins with evidence. Outside, the city continued its normal rhythm. Traffic moved through downtown streets. Office buildings emptied. Lights flickered on across thousands of homes. Yet beneath that ordinary evening, something important had begun. The encounter on that quiet Buckhead Street was no longer simply a traffic stop. It was becoming a documented case built on facts, witnesses, recordings, and a question that would soon attract far more attention than Officer Grant Miller ever imagined. The following week brought a level of attention neither Monica Hayes nor Officer Grant Miller had anticipated. What began on a quiet residential street was now being examined by attorneys, compliance specialists, and senior officials who approached every detail with one goal: determining exactly what happened and why. Inside a downtown conference room, Attorney David Lawson sat before multiple screens displaying synchronized footage from the encounter. Each recording told the same story from a different angle. The dashboard camera captured the conversation clearly. The neighborhood security systems documented the duration of the stop. Witness recordings filled in the remaining gaps. Together, they formed a timeline that was remarkably consistent. There were no missing pieces, no confusion, no uncertainty about who said what or when it happened. Monica attended several review meetings during the week, but she rarely spoke first. She preferred listening. Facts had a way of revealing themselves when given enough room. As legal analysts reviewed the footage frame by frame, one theme continued emerging. The encounter had extended far beyond what the available information seemed to justify. Every document had verified her identity. Every ownership claim proved accurate. Every answer remained consistent. Yet the questions continued. Imagine watching a situation unfold again and again from multiple perspectives and realizing that the outcome would have been completely different if assumptions had never entered the equation. Imagine seeing how a few minutes on a roadside could affect reputations, careers, and public trust. That was what the review team faced. Meanwhile, Officer Grant Miller attended internal meetings of his own. Supervisors asked questions. Reports were reviewed. Timelines were compared against recordings. For the first time, Miller was forced to see the encounter exactly as others would see it. Not through the lens of his intentions, but through the lens of documented evidence. That distinction mattered. The more he watched the recordings, the more difficult it became to explain certain decisions. He found himself replaying moments repeatedly, Questions that seemed reasonable at the time now sounded different. Assumptions that once felt harmless now appeared much larger. Across the city, interest in the case continued growing. Community organizations began discussing the broader issues involved. Legal commentators analyzed publicly available information. Local media outlets requested interviews. Monica declined most of them. She was not interested in becoming a public figure because of a controversy. Her focus remained unchanged. Accountability. That word guided every decision she made. One afternoon, David Lawson entered her office carrying a thick folder filled with reports and evaluations. He placed it on the conference table and sat down across from her. "The evidence review is complete," he said. Monica looked at the folder, and David folded his hands. "The findings are stronger than we expected." He explained that multiple experts had independently reviewed the recordings. Their conclusions aligned. The documentation was thorough. The timeline was clear. The facts supported further legal action. Monica remained quiet for several seconds. Through the office windows, Atlanta stretched toward the horizon beneath a bright afternoon sky. "Then we move forward," she said. David nodded. "Are you prepared for the attention that comes with this?" Monica looked out across the city. This was never about attention. She turned back toward him. "It is about making sure the next person does not have to experience the same thing." David smiled slightly. "That answer is exactly why this matters." And as the legal team prepared the next phase of the case, one reality had become impossible to ignore. The recordings had transformed a brief roadside encounter into something far larger than anyone standing on that quiet street could have imagined. The announcement came on a Thursday morning. Attorney David Lawson stood before a row of microphones inside a downtown Atlanta conference center while reporters filled every available seat. Cameras lined the back wall. Legal analysts, community leaders, and members of the public watched closely. The room felt unusually quiet for such a crowded event. Everyone understood that the statement about to be delivered had been built upon weeks of evidence review, witness interviews, and detailed analysis. David adjusted a folder in front of him and began speaking. "Today we are filing a civil action seeking $15 million in damages based on the facts and evidence collected during a documented traffic stop." The room immediately stirred. Reporters began taking notes. Camera shutters clicked rapidly. Questions formed almost instantly. Yet David remained focused on the facts. He described the recordings, the witness accounts, the timeline, and the conclusions reached after extensive review. He avoided dramatic language. He did not need it. The evidence carried enough weight on its own. Across the city, Monica Hayes watched the press conference from a conference room at company headquarters. Several executives sat nearby, but her attention remained fixed on the screen. She had never wanted this situation to become public. Yet once the review was complete, remaining silent no longer felt responsible. Accountability rarely arrives because it is convenient. It arrives because someone decides that truth matters more than comfort. Imagine knowing that millions of people may soon hear about one of the most uncomfortable moments of your life. Imagine choosing to move forward anyway because you believe the issue extends beyond yourself. That was the decision Monica had made. As news of the lawsuit spread, media coverage expanded rapidly. Local stations carried the story first. Regional outlets followed. Soon national commentators began discussing the case. Legal experts analyzed the recordings. Community organizations examined the broader implications. Social media discussions multiplied by the hour. Throughout it all, one detail remained remarkably consistent. The videos showed exactly what happened. There was little room for speculation. Meanwhile, Officer Grant Miller found himself facing a reality he never expected. What had seemed like an ordinary afternoon now appeared on television screens, news websites, and legal reports. Supervisors continued reviewing policies and procedures. Internal discussions intensified. Every decision from that day received new scrutiny. For the first time, Miller fully understood the scale of the consequences created by a few assumptions made on a quiet residential street. Back at company headquarters, Monica's phone continued receiving messages from colleagues, community leaders, and former scholarship recipients. Many offered support. Others shared their own experiences. The volume surprised her. What began as a personal encounter had clearly touched something much larger. Late that afternoon, David Lawson arrived at her office following the press conference. He placed a stack of documents on the table and smiled slightly. The response has been significant. Monica looked out the window toward the city skyline. This was never about the number. David nodded. He already knew. I know. She turned back toward him. It is about establishing a standard. The attorney smiled. Then today was an important step. Outside, traffic flowed through Atlanta as another ordinary evening approached. Yet for thousands of people following the story, something important had changed. A roadside encounter that began with doubt and assumptions was now being examined through evidence, accountability, and law. And the next chapter was only beginning. Weeks passed, and the case continued moving through the legal system with a momentum that surprised even experienced observers. What had begun as a roadside encounter on a quiet Buckhead street was now being discussed in conference rooms, law schools, community forums, and corporate board meetings. Yet for Monica Hayes, daily life remained remarkably consistent. Each morning she arrived at her office before most of her staff. She reviewed development plans, met with project managers, and focused on the same mission that had guided her company for years. New housing projects continued moving forward. Neighborhood revitalization efforts continued expanding. Employees continued doing the work that had made the company successful long before anyone outside Atlanta knew her name. The lawsuit might have become a headline, but Monica refused to let it become her identity. One afternoon, she visited a development site on the edge of the city. Construction crews moved efficiently beneath a clear blue sky, while future homeowners toured model units nearby. Several residents recognized her from recent news coverage and approached to offer support. Monica thanked them politely, but what struck her most was not the attention. It was the stories. Again and again, people described moments when they felt underestimated, dismissed, or judged before anyone took the time to know them. The details varied. The emotions did not. Imagine discovering that your experience has become a mirror reflecting the experiences of countless others. Imagine realizing that a moment you never wanted could become a catalyst for conversations that needed to happen. That realization stayed with Monica throughout the day. Meanwhile, attorney David Lawson continued preparing the case. His team reviewed additional documentation, organized witness statements, and responded to growing public interest. The evidence remained consistent. Every new review reinforced the same conclusion. The recordings captured exactly what happened. There was no mystery left to solve. The only remaining questions concerned accountability and consequences. Across town, Officer Grant Miller found himself living with a different reality than the one he had known before the incident. Public attention has a way of forcing reflection. Every discussion about the case brought him back to the same uncomfortable truth. The evidence never changed because the facts never changed. What changed was his understanding of those facts. For the first time, he began examining assumptions he had rarely questioned in the past. The process was not easy. Meaningful growth rarely is. One evening, Monica attended a community leadership event where local students presented proposals for neighborhood improvement projects. She sat quietly in the audience listening as young people shared ideas about parks, education, transportation, and housing. Their optimism reminded her why she chose to move forward with the case. Not because of money, not because of publicity, because systems improve when people are willing to challenge what is wrong and protect what is right. As the event concluded, one student approached her and asked a simple question. Do you think things can really change? Monica smiled thoughtfully before answering. Change begins the moment people stop accepting what should never have been normal. The student nodded slowly. And as Monica walked toward the exit beneath the warm evening lights, she realized that regardless of how the legal process ended, something important had already happened. A conversation had begun. And conversations powerful enough to change minds often become powerful enough to change much more. Several months later, the legal process reached a turning point. By then, the recordings had been reviewed countless times by attorneys, experts, and officials. Every angle had been examined. Every statement had been compared against the evidence. The facts remained unchanged. What began on a quiet street in Buckhead had become a case study discussed far beyond Atlanta. Yet on the morning of the final announcement, Monica Hayes felt surprisingly calm. She stood near the window of her office watching sunlight reflect across the city skyline. Construction projects continued rising. New developments continued moving forward. Employees continued arriving for work. Life had never stopped. That was the lesson she appreciated most. Challenges may demand attention, but they do not have to define an entire future. Later that afternoon, attorney David Lawson joined her in a conference room overlooking downtown. Several members of the legal team were already gathered around the table. Their expressions carried a mixture of relief and satisfaction. After months of preparation, review, and negotiation, the case had reached a resolution. David placed a folder on the table and smiled. "It is finished." Monica looked at him quietly. "And the agreement includes substantial accountability measures, policy reviews, additional training requirements, and a financial settlement valued at $15 million. For a moment, the room remained silent. Not because anyone was surprised, because everyone understood what the outcome represented. The number itself was significant, but it was not the most important part. The most important part was the acknowledgement that the evidence mattered. The truth mattered. Accountability mattered. Imagine spending months pursuing a difficult process not because it is easy, not because it is popular, but because it is necessary. Then imagine reaching the finish line and realizing the victory was never really about yourself. Monica thought about the students she had met, the business owners who shared their experiences, the families who had written letters, the young people who asked whether change was possible. They were the reason she stayed committed. Across the city, Officer Grant Miller received the news as well. The months since the incident had forced him to confront assumptions he once accepted without question. Reflection had not been comfortable. Growth rarely is. Yet for the first time, he understood how quickly a person's judgment could shape another person's experience. That understanding arrived too late to prevent consequences, but not too late to learn from them. As evening approached, Monica attended the opening ceremony for a new community education center funded through one of her company's partnerships. Students filled the building. Parents toured classrooms. Teachers prepared programs designed to create opportunities for future generations. Standing near the entrance, Monica watched families explore the facility and smiled. This was where her attention belonged. This was always the goal, creating doors where none existed before. As the ceremony concluded, a young student asked her what she had learned from the entire experience. Monica looked around the building before answering. Never let someone else's assumptions define your value. The student nodded thoughtfully. Outside, the sun slowly disappeared beyond the Atlanta skyline. A new generation stepped into opportunities created by people who refused to accept limits placed upon them. And somewhere in the distance, the memory of a roadside encounter faded into history. He thought the road belonged to suspicion. She proved it belonged to the truth. And in the end, the truth traveled much farther.